Sure, John Quagliariello.
Can you spell your last name for me?
Quagliariello.
And position?
Meteorologist for the National Weather Service.
All right, John, so just looking at me here.
Okay.
One question that I have, I think a lot of people don't think about tornadoes when it comes to a hurricane. I heard this morning that there's a possibility. Can you elaborate on those?
Sure. With any tropical cyclone, whether it be a tropical storm or a hurricane, you can often have isolated brief tornadoes that develop within those outer rain bands. Generally, the tornado threat is greater along and east of where the storm tracks. So in this case, we would think the greatest threat would be along the immediate coast. Generally, anything east of I-95 would have a threat of those isolated and very brief tornadoes.
Are there any that you kind of can see maybe forming already yet?
No, not at this point. As the outer rain bands start coming in, we'll be watching radar very closely. The Weather Service meteorologists will be watching radar, looking for any kind of indications that there might be a tornado developing. The good thing with those tornadoes is that they tend to be...
You can just start that statement over.
Okay.
We're going to edit, so it's okay.
Okay. With any tornadoes that are associated with tropical storms or hurricanes, the good news is they're often short-lived and usually very weak tornadoes, but they can be hard to detect sometimes on radar, and you're not going to have as much warning as you would with a typical tornado event that we might have during a severe weather outbreak, for example.
Right. So today, the storm is expected to come along our coast. So what kind of things are you seeing as far as an update on where things are right now?
Sure. Well, we're growing increasingly concerned to see some significant impact, especially along the coast. The wind's certainly going to be an issue. We're going to have hurricane-force winds along the coast, especially as you go from parts of Charleston up through the Myrtle Beach area. We'll see the strongest winds from the storm. So that is a concern. But only 8% of all fatalities in hurricanes come from wind. Actually, most fatalities come from the water. It's a storm surge and the flooding rainfall. And we are very concerned about both of those with this storm. We're going to see significant storm surge all along the South Carolina coast, beginning tonight and maybe even going into Friday morning. Such salt water rising from the ocean fairly rapidly is going to be entering buildings. It's going to be inundating roadways, making some roads impassable. So that's an issue there as well. And then the heavy rainfall, when we see 6 to 12 inches of rain, even more in some spots, that's enough to cause flash flooding. So some roadways, again, will be impassable. Water will be rising rapidly. Homes could be inundated with some of that heavy rainfall as well. So the combination of both of those is a big concern. So people, if they're out traveling, need to make sure you're not entering any roadways that look like they have high water on it for that reason.
Now, the talks of the high tide, king tide, and the storm all at once, is that still a possibility? And just kind of walk me through what all that means.
Sure, there's been a bad combination. We've had higher than normal tides essentially since last week. So there's a lot of water that kind of stays built up along the coast. Now you add to it the surge from the ocean. So what happens is all the strong winds from the hurricane kind of cause the water to build up. And as the storm approaches, that water that's building up now moves onshore along the coast. And that's storm surge. So that's water that builds up above your normal tides. So that's all coming in at one time. And that's going to flood a lot of low-lying locations along the coast and even up along some rivers and creeks and streams. Then you add to it a lot of heavy rainfall. And that water is not able to drain out like it typically does to the waterways because that water from the ocean is so high. So that water stays there, and that just adds to the flooding threat in low-lying coastal locations.
So as of right now, we know this can change within 5 minutes. Where are we as far as the timeline for expecting kind of the worst to start happening?
Sure, we're going to see conditions start deteriorating throughout the day today. We're already seeing some gusts approaching tropical storm strength with some of the outer rain bands approaching the coast now. But generally, we expect tropical storm force winds to start developing this afternoon into tonight, and then we could see the potential for those hurricane conditions along the immediate coast really by the start of tomorrow morning and continuing right through tomorrow evening as the storm passes offshore.
So what's kind of our clear area? Like how many days are we talking here?
Yeah, I mean, the good thing, the storm isn't going to linger very long. It's going to be moving about 10 to 15 miles an hour off the coast. So really the worst of it's going to come tonight. Thursday and Thursday night would be the worst of the conditions, and then we expect things to start improving on Friday. There's still be some surge along parts of the upper South Carolina coast, maybe into early Friday morning, but by daytime Friday we expect conditions to really be improving throughout South Carolina.
Is North Carolina projected to be hit worse than South Carolina?
Projections are that the way the North Carolina coast kind of comes out, that Dorian might make a close approach or might even make landfall in parts of southeast or eastern North Carolina. So that's certainly possible, but they had very similar threats with the storm surge, the high winds, and the heavy rainfall in coastal areas of North Carolina as well.
One last question. Obviously, each storm is its own beast. You can't compare one, apples and apples with another. But if you had to maybe kind of put, as far as the power behind this one compared to another one, what would we be close to?
Sure, it's really hard to compare storms because everyone is different. Even though it might have really significant impacts, those impacts might occur in a different spot than the last storm did. So we get worried that someone's going to say, I was fine during this last storm, so I'll be fine in this case. And every storm is different. You can't do that. But the track is actually very similar to Hurricane Matthew. It's something that's kind of paralleling the South Carolina coast. So we'll see a lot of impacts to the coast, a lot of beach erosion, a lot of downed trees, a lot of water. So it'll be similar to Matthew in that respect. We just don't anticipate the similar river flooding issues that we saw during Matthew, where it was catastrophic flooding in parts of the Petey and Waccamaw River basins.
What about the parts where they haven't recovered from Matthew yet, the erosion, different things like that? What's going to happen now?
Yeah, this is only going to make things worse in those locations that haven't been able to recover from Matthew. So that's certainly a concern. It's going to be a pretty hard hit for many coastal areas. Even inland in Matthew, you'll recall there were a lot of trees down all the way through, like Orangeburg County, for example, had a lot of trees down in Matthew. And that's going to be the case here as well. We're going to see tropical storm force winds all the way just beyond I-95. So there's going to be strong winds well inland that are going to take a lot of trees down as well. So I think the impacts will be felt across a good part of eastern South Carolina with the storm.